The old woman shielded a wounded kid during a hurricane, not knowing she was protecting the heir to a powerful organization, and that 15 years later he'd return in public, not as a threat, but as a shield. Wind howled like something alive, tearing through Sunnyside with fists made of rain. The smell of wet concrete mixed with fear and bodies pressed too close together. Inside the Greater New Hope Church Annex, the air was thick, sodden clothing, whispered prayers, and the sharp metallic taste of storm. Flashlights carved shadows across brick walls. Kids whimpered. Grown folks stared at the ceiling like willpower alone could keep it from caving in. Esther moved through the crowded space with bottled water in her arms, her legs still strong back then, her voice still steady. She wasn't the type to freeze when things got hard. She was the type people turned to without even realizing they were turning, the kind of woman whose name got called in a crisis because everyone knew she'd answer. It was chaos, but it was organized chaos, the kind that happens when a neighborhood knows itself. Abina coordinated supplies near the entrance. Amina, a volunteer nurse, checked on the elderly. The pastor kept his voice loud and his prayers louder. Outside, Hurricane Ike howled like it wanted revenge. That's when Esther saw him, a boy, maybe 10, standing alone near the back stairwell like he didn't belong to anyone in the room. His shirt hung torn at the sleeve. His breathing came sharp and shallow, and when he shifted his weight, Esther caught it, a dark stain spreading along his ribs, soaking through the fabric. He wasn't crying. He wasn't calling for help. He was standing perfectly still, like someone had trained him to disappear. Esther set the water bottles down and moved toward him slowly, the way you approach a wounded animal that might bolt. She kept her voice soft, her hands visible. "Baby," she said, "you hurt?" The boy's eyes snapped to her face, then to her hands, then to the crowded room behind her. He was measuring danger in every direction. His lips moved. Words in Korean, too fast and too quiet for Esther to understand. Then the building shuddered. A violent gust slammed the annex doors so hard the hinges screamed. Somewhere outside, a transformer exploded with a flash that turned the windows white. People shouted. Someone's child wailed. The pastor yelled for everyone to get away from the glass. In the chaos, the boy stumbled. His knees buckled. Esther lunged forward and caught him before he hit the concrete floor, and she felt how light he was. Too light, like a child who'd been running on empty for too long. She dragged him toward the narrow service corridor near the storage room, away from the windows, away from the crowd. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't safe by any official standard. But it was the thickest interior wall in the building, and Esther's instincts told her that's where they needed to be. "Stay right here," she ordered, her voice carrying an authority that surprised even her. "Head down, hands on your ears." A panel of ceiling tile ripped loose and crashed near the hallway entrance. Dust exploded into the air. A flashlight went spinning across the floor. The boy flinched hard, and Esther did the only thing her body knew how to do. She covered him. She wrapped herself around him, shielding his head with her arms, pressing him into the corner. The wind roared through cracks in the walls like it had teeth. Esther held tight and refused to let go. From the main room, Abina's voice cut through the noise. "Esther! Esther, where you at?" The boy heard it too. He blinked hard, like that sound, her name being shouted, was the only thing anchoring him to the world. When the worst gust passed, Amina rushed into the corridor with a medical kit, her hands shaking but her face focused. She lifted the boy's shirt and froze. "This isn't a scrape," Amina murmured, her voice tight. "This is from something sharp, something deliberate." The boy tried to pull away, but Esther held his wrist gently and shook her head. "It's okay," she told him, meeting his eyes. "You safe right now." That's when Esther noticed the detail that didn't fit, a thin black bracelet on the boy's wrist. Not cheap plastic, not a child's toy. It was metal, sleek, with a small plate built into it, etched with Korean characters, and a symbol like a three-pointed knot. Amina saw it too and frowned. "That don't look like something you pick up on the street." The boy's lips parted. His voice barely made it past his teeth. "Woojin." Esther thought he was telling her his name, so she repeated it back to him like a promise, like something she'd guard. "Woojin," she said, Okay, okay, baby. Then, another crack of thunder. Someone from the main room shouted that emergency responders were outside. That's when the real danger walked in, wearing a uniform. A man in a rain-slick jacket stepped through the annex entrance, scanning faces with eyes that moved too fast, too sharp. His radio chirped, but he wasn't listening to the pastor or the volunteers. His gaze landed on Woo Jin and stopped cold, like recognition, not concern. He moved fast. "I'll take him," the man said, reaching for Woo Jin's wrist without asking permission. Esther stepped between them without thinking. "You ain't taking him nowhere unless you tell me where." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ma'am, we're moving him to a secure location." Secure. That's the word people use when they want to hide bad intentions behind good language. Woo Jin's eyes went wide. He grabbed Esther's sleeve with desperate strength. The man tugged harder, and in the struggle, the bracelet plate snapped loose, clinking to the floor. Esther saw it fall, and before anyone could react, she slid her foot over it like she was hiding a seed from a thief, because something in her spirit screamed, "They're not here to help him." The man forced Woo Jin away anyway. Esther shouted, the pastor protested, but storms make chaos, and chaos makes cover. Within minutes, Woo Jin was gone, loaded into a vehicle that wasn't an ambulance and didn't wait for anyone's permission. And Sunnyside, battered by wind and water, swallowed the moment like it never happened. Esther stood there in the corridor, rain dripping from her hair, the small metal plate cold and heavy in her palm. Amina touched her shoulder. "What just happened?" Amina whispered. Esther looked down at the bracelet piece, the Korean characters, the three-pointed knot, the weight of something that didn't belong to a lost child in a hurricane. "I don't know yet," Esther said quietly, "but I'm keeping this. Not as proof for the system, as proof for herself that she wasn't imagining what happened, as proof that somewhere out there, a boy named Woo Jin existed, and somebody wanted to make sure nobody found him." For the first time in that humble church annex, the danger stopped feeling like wind and water. It started feeling like something bigger, like a shadow that had followed a child through the storm. Hello, my friends and loved ones. Thanks for joining me on this beautiful story. As we continue this story, kindly take a moment to subscribe to this channel, like the video, and I love to always hear from you. Where are you watching from, and what time is it at your end right now? Thank you for subscribing. Now let's continue with this beautiful story. For weeks, Esther tried everything. She called shelters, she spoke to city lines, she even went downtown to offices where tired clerks offered sympathy, but no answers. Everybody acted like a boy who spoke Korean couldn't possibly vanish in Houston during a hurricane. But Esther had the bracelet plate, small, cold, and heavy in her palm like it held a secret. So she kept it. Not as proof for the system, as proof for herself that she wasn't imagining what happened. 15 years passed. Esther's body changed. An old injury in time put her in a wheelchair. But her presence stayed the same, steady, warm, unmovable. She became the kind of elder people visited when they were scared, even if they didn't say they were scared. And Sunnyside had new fear now. Not dramatic movie threats, something more real. A quiet wave of city cleanup enforcement and predatory paperwork. Business permits suddenly expired. Community vendors got fines they couldn't explain. And a slick neighborhood advisor named Adekunle started showing up to meetings with polished flyers and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't threaten anyone openly. He did worse. He made people feel powerless on paper. Then came the summer block party at Sunnyside Park. Tents up, DJ playing, kids running, elders laughing. Adebayo prayed into a mic. Abena handed out plates. A young organizer named Iomide filmed little clips for social media, trying to show the world Sunnyside wasn't broken. That's when the street went quiet. Black SUVs rolled in slow, too expensive, too disciplined. Men in suits stepped out like synchronized shadows. People stopped dancing. Somebody whispered, "That looked like trouble." Then Woo Jin stepped out. He wasn't a child anymore. He was tall, controlled, sharp in a way that made the air feel thinner. A faint scar lined his ribs, hidden beneath his jacket, but there. He scanned the crowd like someone trained to find threats before threats could find him. Beside him stood a woman, Chaewon, calm eyes, earpiece, watching rooftops. Fear spread fast. People backed up. Phones came out. Woo Jin's gaze landed on Abina first, and his face tightened, because the only clear memory he'd carried out of that hurricane was a name being shouted in chaos. Esther! By someone else. In his child mind, the names had tangled. He thought Abina might be her. Older now. Different, but close enough for doubt. Abina noticed him staring and felt her stomach drop. She glanced at Iomide, who was already filming, eyes wide. Woo Jin walked toward Abina, voice low. You were there. Abina's hands trembled. Sir, I don't know you. But something in his eyes made her pause. Not menace, but something fragile beneath steel, like he was looking for something he'd lost a long time ago. Please, Abina said quietly, gesturing toward the food tent. He can sit with us. It wasn't strategic, it was instinct. The kind Sunnyside taught you. When someone looks lost, you offer a chair. Woo Jin hesitated. Then he nodded once and followed. Chaewon stayed positioned where she could see all the exits. They sat under the tent, the noise of the party a distant hum now. Iomide watched from a few feet away, phone half raised, catching details. The scar line barely visible at Woo Jin's collar, the way his hand stayed relaxed on the table while his eyes stayed alert, scanning, calculating. Abina poured water into a cup and slid it toward him. You okay? Woo Jin froze. That phrase, you okay, punched through 15 years like a fist through glass. Suddenly he was 10 again, in a concrete corridor, wind screaming, arms wrapped around him, a voice asking softly, Baby, you hurt? He blinked hard, forcing himself back to the present. You're from here, Woo Jin said carefully, not a question. A test? Abina nodded. Born and raised, Sunnyside, Houston? Why? Woo Jin's jaw tightened. His fingers curled slightly like he was holding on to something invisible. He asked one careful question, like it cost him pride. Do you know Esther? The cup paused midair in Abina's hand. Her eyes sharpened. The air between them changed, confusion turning into something sharper, something urgent. She set the cup down slowly. Why? Abina said, voice steady but her pulse hammering. Do you know that name? Abina set the cup down, her pulse loud in her ears. Why do you know that name? Woo Jin exhaled slowly, like the answer had been sitting in his chest for 15 years and finally had permission to leave. She saved my life, he said quietly, a long time ago, during a hurricane. Abina stared at him, then understanding flickered across her face, slow at first, then all at once. Hurricane Ike, she whispered. You're the boy. Woo Jin nodded once. His hand stayed flat on the table, but his knuckles had gone white. Esther is... Abina swallowed. She's the grandma everyone listens to. Wheelchair now, but still the anchor. Still the one we go to when things get hard. Something in Woo Jin's chest loosened. After 15 years of searching through fragments and half-remembered voices, he finally had confirmation. She was real. She was alive, and she was still her. But before he could respond, Chaewon appeared at his side, her face unreadable, but her body language sharp. She leaned close, voice low. We have movement. Someone connected to Ada Kunle is in Manhattan tonight. They've been watching since we arrived. Woo Jin's expression didn't change, but Iomide, still filming from nearby, caught the way his shoulders shifted, like armor sliding into place. Where? Woo Jin asked. East Village, 2 blocks from the hotel, Chaewon said. They're not moving yet, just watching. Abina's stomach turned. Wait, Adekunle? How do you know about... Woo Jin looked at her directly. Because people like him don't operate in isolation, and if he's been pressuring Sunnyside, someone hired him to do it. Abina's breath caught. She glanced at Iomide, who had lowered the phone, face pale. What do you mean hired? Abina asked. Woo Jin leaned back slightly, his voice measured. The permits expiring, the fines that don't make sense, vendors getting squeezed. That's not bureaucracy, that's coordination. Abina felt her hands go cold. How do you know about all that? Because, Wu Jin said, I've seen it before, in other cities, other neighborhoods. It's the same pattern. Make people feel powerless on paper so they leave without a fight. Aamide spoke up, voice shaking slightly. But why Sunnyside? We're not rich. We're not in the way of anything. Wu Jin's jaw tightened. You're in the way of something, or someone thinks you are. Abina pressed her palms against the table. Esther's been asking questions. She's been pushing back at the meetings. Adekunle doesn't like it, but he smiles and acts respectful. He's waiting, Wu Jin said flatly, waiting for the right moment to remove her voice from the equation. The words hung in the air like a threat that had already been spoken elsewhere. Abina's voice dropped. You think he's going to hurt her? Wu Jin didn't answer immediately. He looked out toward the park. The tents, the music, the kids still running, despite the tension. If Adekunle is moving like that, Wu Jin said finally, it's because something bigger is coming. And Esther is the one person who can rally everyone to say no. Chaewon's earpiece crackled softly. She touched it, listened, then looked at Wu Jin with something close to concern. They're mobilizing, she said quietly, not just watching anymore. Wu Jin stood up, his movements controlled but decisive. He didn't look at the Manhattan skyline behind him, the fireworks waiting to explode, the countdown ticking somewhere in the distance. He'd come here to feel something normal for one night, to stand on a rooftop and pretend he was just another person celebrating. But the world had found him anyway. It always did. He looked at Abina, and for the first time, she saw past the armor, saw the boy who'd been dragged into a storm and never really made it out. We're going to Houston, Wu Jin said. Tonight. Abina's breath hitched. Tonight? But it's New Year's. Exactly, Wu Jin said, his voice hard now. That's when they'll move, when everyone's distracted, when no one's watching. Aamide stepped forward, phone gripped tight. Then we're coming with you. Wu Jin shook his head. This isn't... She's our grandma too, Abina said firmly. You don't get to do this alone. Wu Jin held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Get your things, he said. We leave in 20 minutes. 15 years earlier. Hurricane Ike didn't arrive like rain. It arrived like a warning from the sky. The wind tore through Sunnyside with violence that felt personal, peeling signs, turning trash bins into missiles, ripping branches from trees that had stood for decades. The power died early. Radios spat out emergency updates like they were reading last rites. Inside the Greater New Hope Church Annex, the air smelled like wet clothing, fear, and prayer. Kids cried. Grown men stared at the ceiling like they could hold it up with their eyes. Flashlights carved wild shadows across brick walls. Esther moved through the crowd with bottled water, her legs still strong then, her voice still steady. Abina coordinated supplies near the entrance. Amina checked on the elderly with quick, efficient hands. That's when Esther saw him. A boy, maybe 10, standing alone near the back stairwell like he didn't belong to anyone. One sleeve torn, breathing sharp, guarded. And when he shifted, Esther caught it. A dark stain spreading along his ribs, soaking through his shirt. He wasn't wailing. He wasn't begging. He looked trained to be quiet. Esther approached slowly, keeping her tone gentle. Baby, you hurt? The boy's eyes flicked to her face, to her hands, to the crowd behind her, measuring danger in every direction. He whispered something in Korean, too fast, too quiet. Then the building shuddered. A violent gust slammed the annex doors. Somewhere outside, a transformer exploded with a flash that turned the windows white. People screamed. The pastor shouted for everyone to move away from glass. The boy stumbled. His knees buckled. Esther caught him before he hit the floor, felt how light he was, how empty. She dragged him toward the narrow service corridor near the storage room, away from windows, away from chaos. Stay right here, she ordered. Head down, hands on your ears. A ceiling panel ripped loose and crashed near the hallway entrance. Dust exploded. A flashlight went spinning. The boy flinched, and Esther wrapped herself around him, shielding his head with her arms, pressing him into the corner. The wind roared. Esther held tight. From the main room, Abina's voice cut through the panic. "Esther! Esther! Where you at?" The boy heard it. He blinked hard like that sound, that name, was the only thing anchoring him to reality. When the worst gust passed, Amina rushed in with a medical kit. She lifted the boy's shirt and froze. "This isn't a scrape," she murmured. "This is from something sharp." The boy tried to pull away. Esther held his wrist gently and shook her head. "It's okay. You safe right now." That's when Esther noticed the bracelet. Thin, black, metal, a small plate built into it, etched with Korean characters and a 3-pointed knot symbol. Amina frowned. "That's not street jewelry." The boy's lips parted. "Woo-jin." Esther repeated it like a promise. "Woo-jin. Okay, baby." Then someone shouted that emergency responders were outside. A man in a rain-slick jacket stepped into the annex, scanning faces too quickly, too sharply. His radio chirped, but he wasn't listening to anyone. His gaze landed on Woo Jin and stopped. Recognition, not concern. He moved fast. "I'll take him," the man said, reaching for Woo Jin's wrist. Esther stepped between them. "You ain't taking him nowhere unless you tell me where." The man smiled coldly. "Ma'am, we're moving him to a secure location." Secure. The word people use to hide bad intentions. Woo Jin's eyes went wide. He grabbed Esther's sleeve with desperate strength. The man tugged harder. In the struggle, the bracelet plate snapped loose, clinking to the floor. Esther slid her foot over it like she was hiding a seed from a thief, because something in her spirit screamed, "They're not here to help him." The man forced Woo Jin away anyway. Esther shouted. The pastor protested. But storms make chaos, and chaos makes cover. Within minutes, Woo Jin was gone, loaded into a vehicle that wasn't an ambulance. Esther stood in the corridor, rain dripping from her hair, the small metal plate cold in her palm. She didn't know what it meant, didn't know who the boy really was. But she knew what she'd seen. A child being taken by someone who had no right. A wound that wasn't an accident. A bracelet that didn't belong to the streets. She kept the plate. Not for police, for herself. Proof that somewhere, a boy named Woo Jin existed. What Esther didn't know, Woo Jin wasn't random. He was the heir, the only son of a powerful organization his father had built across 3 countries. The night of the hurricane, rival factions had moved to eliminate him. His protectors had hidden him in Sunnyside, thinking no one would look for a Korean boy in a black neighborhood during a storm. They were wrong. But Esther had been right. As the vehicle pulled away, Child Woo Jin turned his head one last time, looking back through the rain-streaked window at the church annex, at Esther's face, and he refused to forget it. They arrived in Houston just after midnight. No sirens, no announcement, just black SUVs sliding through quiet streets like shadows that knew the way. Woo Jin sat in the back seat, watching Sunnyside appear through the window. Brick houses with chain-link fences, corner stores with hand-painted signs, streetlights that flickered but still worked. It wasn't misery, it was life. Kids practiced dance steps near the park, even at this hour, music playing from someone's phone. An elder sat on his porch with a beer, watching the street like he'd been watching it for 40 years. A small business, Adebayo's Cuts and Styles, still had its lights on, someone sweeping the floor inside. Chaewon spoke quietly from the front seat. "Where do you want to start?" Woo Jin didn't answer immediately. He was looking at a mural on the side of a building. Bright colors, faces of people who'd lived here, died here, built here. Sunnyside Strong painted across the bottom in gold letters. "The church," Woo Jin said finally. "Greater New Hope." Adebayo was locking up the barber shop when he saw the SUVs roll past. His hand froze on the door handle. Vehicles like that didn't come to Sunnyside unless someone was in trouble or someone was the trouble. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to the community group chat. "Anybody know who just pulled up in 3 black trucks?" Responses came fast. "Saw them near the park. Look like feds? Nah, too clean, too organized." Adebayo's jaw tightened. He'd been holding the community together while pressure built from every direction, permits disappearing, fines piling up, Adekunle showing up to meetings with his smooth talk and sharper threats. And now this. He grabbed his keys and headed toward the church. Amina was inside the annex when Woo Jin walked in. She was organizing medical supplies for the block party. Bandages, water bottles, basic first aid. She looked up when the door opened, ready to greet a neighbor. Then she froze. The man standing in the doorway was tall, controlled, wearing a suit that cost more than her monthly rent. But it wasn't the suit that made her breath catch. It was his eyes, dark, guarded. And beneath the surface, something familiar, something she'd seen 15 years ago in a child's face during a storm. Her gaze dropped instinctively to his ribs. She couldn't see through the jacket, but she knew. She knew. "You," Amina whispered. "You're the boy." Woo Jin's expression didn't change, but something softened in his posture. He nodded once. "I didn't think anyone would remember," he said quietly. Amina's hand went to her mouth. "How could we forget? Esther never stopped looking." The words hit Woo Jin like a fist. He swallowed hard, his composure cracking for just a second before he pulled it back together. "Where is she?" he asked. Before Amina could answer, Adebayo pushed through the door, eyes sharp, body tense. "Who are you? And what do you want with—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw Amina's face. "Adebayo," Amina said carefully, "this is the child, from Hurricane Ike, the one Esther saved." Adebayo stared at Woo Jin, skepticism warring with shock. "The boy who disappeared?" "Yes," Woo Jin said. He kept his voice even, respectful. "I didn't come to take over. I came because Esther saved my life, and now someone's trying to hurt hers." Adebayo's eyes narrowed. "You talking about Adekunle?" "I'm talking about whoever hired him," Woo Jin said. "The permits, the fines, the pressure. That's coordinated, and if Esther keeps pushing back, they'll escalate." Adebayo crossed his arms. "And you think showing up with armed men in expensive suits is going to help?" Woo Jin met his gaze without flinching. "I think showing up is better than letting her face it alone." The two men stared at each other, a test of intent, of loyalty, of who had the right to stand in this room and say those words. Finally, Adebayo exhaled. "There's a block party tomorrow night, New Year community event. Abina and Iomide been organizing it for weeks, trying to remind folks we're still here, still strong." "Then that's when they'll move," Woo Jin said quietly. "When everyone's gathered, when it'll send a message." Amina's face went pale. "You think they'll do something at the party?" Woo Jin's jaw tightened. "I think they'll try." They walked toward the park together. Woo Jin, Chae-won, Amina, Adebayo. The early morning air smelled like dew and asphalt. Tents were already being set up for the event. Abina was directing volunteers. Iomide was filming setup footage, trying to build excitement online. And then Woo Jin saw her, Esther, front row near the stage area, wheelchair, black and white dress, silver hair catching the streetlight, calm, steady, unbroken. Woo Jin stopped walking. Gratitude hit him like shame, like guilt for taking 15 years, like relief that she was still here, like grief for the boy he'd been and the man he'd become. Chae-won glanced at him. "You okay?" Woo Jin didn't answer. He just stared at the woman who'd covered him with her body when the world was tearing itself apart. And for the first time in 15 years, he let himself feel what he'd been running from. He was home. Woo Jin walked toward Esther slowly, each step measured, controlled. He'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his head, what he'd say, how he'd explain, how he'd thank her for the one thing no amount of money or power could repay. But when Esther looked up and saw him approaching, her body went rigid. Her hands gripped the wheelchair armrests. Her eyes tracked him the way you track danger, assessing distance, calculating escape routes that didn't exist anymore. Woo Jin saw it and stopped mid-step. She wasn't seeing him. She was seeing the uniform, the rain-slicked jacket. The man who'd taken a child 15 years ago and disappeared him into the storm. "Ma'am," Woo Jin started, voice softer than he'd used in years. "I'm not—" I don't know you, Esther said, her voice steady but her fear leaking through. And I don't need whatever you're selling. Abina stepped closer, protective. Esther, it's okay. But Wu Jin raised a hand, stopping her, because this wasn't something Abena could explain for him. This was his to fix. He knelt down slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. Eye level with Esther now, the way you approach someone who deserves respect, not intimidation. 15 years ago, Wu Jin said quietly, you saved a boy during Hurricane Ike, in the Greater New Hope Church Annex, a service corridor near the storage room. Esther's breath caught. Her eyes sharpened. You covered him with your body, Wu Jin continued. When the ceiling came down, when the wind had teeth, you held him like he was yours to protect. Esther's hands trembled on the armrests. Wu Jin reached into his jacket, slowly, carefully, and pulled out something small, wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it, revealing the thin metal plate etched with Korean characters and a 3-pointed knot. You kept this, Wu Jin said, his voice rough now. When they took me, when the bracelet broke, you hid it under your foot. Esther stared at the plate. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her hand moved toward it instinctively, then stopped, like she was afraid it might disappear if she touched it. Wu Jin, she whispered. Not a question. A prayer finally answered. Wu Jin's composure cracked. He nodded, swallowing hard against the weight in his chest. It's me, he said. Esther's eyes filled. She reached out with shaking hands and cupped his face, the way you touch something precious, something you thought you'd lost forever. Baby, she breathed. They took you. I tried to find you. I know, Wu Jin said, his voice breaking. I know you did. Tears slipped down Esther's face, and she pulled him closer. Not a hug, but an anchoring. Like she needed to make sure he was real, solid, here. Around them, the park had gone quiet. Abena wiped her eyes. Amina pressed a hand to her mouth. Adebayo stood with his arms crossed, but his jaw was tight, his eyes wet. Iomide's phone was still recording, but her hands were shaking. I spent years with power, Wu Jin said, his forehead resting against Esther's hands. Money, resources, people who could find anyone, anywhere. And still I couldn't find you, because I didn't know your name. He pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. I only knew I owed you my life. Esther shook her head, crying harder now. You don't owe me nothing, baby. You were a child. I was a child, Wu Jin agreed, and you treated me like I mattered, like I was worth saving, even though you didn't know who I was, even though it put you in danger. Esther cupped his face again, her voice fierce despite the tears. You did matter. You do matter. Wu Jin closed his eyes, letting those words sink in, words he hadn't heard in 15 years, words he'd stopped believing he deserved. When he opened his eyes again, Esther's expression had shifted. The tears were still there, but something sharper had joined them, something urgent. Baby, she said quietly, I'm glad you came back, but you need to know. Adekunle been circling this neighborhood like a vulture. Wu Jin's posture changed instantly, gratitude shifting to focus. Tell me, he said. Esther's grip tightened on his hands. He shows up to meetings with fancy papers, talks about development opportunities and city partnerships, but every time someone pushes back, their permit disappears. Their business gets a fine. Their lights get cut. He's isolating you, Wu Jin said quietly. Making people feel like resistance costs more than compliance. Esther nodded. And tomorrow night, at the block party, he's supposed to be there, said he wants to address community concerns. Wu Jin's jaw tightened. He looked at Chaewon, who was already on her phone, pulling up intel. That's not a speech, Wu Jin said. That's a move. Esther's eyes darkened. That's what I thought too. Wu Jin stood slowly, his mind already calculating angles, threats, responses. But before he could step away, Esther grabbed his wrist, firm, unmovable. Wu Jin, she said, her voice steady now. Whatever you came here to do, don't make it worse for these people. They've been surviving long before you showed up. Wu Jin looked down at her, this woman who'd saved him with nothing but her body and her will, and nodded. I'm not here to take over, he said. I'm here to make sure no one takes you away from them. Esther held his gaze for a long moment. Then she nodded. Good, she said. Because tomorrow night, that vulture's going to learn Sunnyside don't scare easy. Adekunle didn't carry a gun. He carried a briefcase. Inside, permits with expiration dates that didn't exist last month, fines for violations nobody could explain, city codes that suddenly applied to buildings that had stood for decades, legal language that sounded official enough to scare people who couldn't afford lawyers. He was a monster made of paper, and paper was harder to fight than fists. By morning, the rumors had spread through Sunnyside like fever. The man in the suit is connected to organized crime. He brought armed guards. He's here to take over the neighborhood. Esther knows him, but nobody knows why. At Adebayo's barbershop, 3 men stood outside arguing. I'm telling you, those SUVs mean trouble, one said. We should cancel the block party. Cancel? Another shot back. That's exactly what Adekunle wants. Us too scared to stand together. Standing together don't mean nothing if bullets start flying. Adebayo stepped out, wiping his hands on a towel. Ain't nobody shooting nobody, and if y'all spent half as much time fact-checking as you do panicking, you'd know Wu Jin came here because of Adekunle, not with him. How you know that? The first man challenged. Because Esther vouched for him, Adebayo said firmly, and if that ain't good enough for you, then you don't know Esther. The men went quiet, but doubt still hung in the air. Inside the church annex, Wu Jin sat across from Abena and Ayomid, Chaewon standing nearby with a tablet showing surveillance feeds. They're scared, Abena said quietly. People think you brought the violence with you. Wu Jin's jaw tightened. That's exactly what Adekunle wants. If the neighborhood blames me, they stop looking at him. Ayomid leaned forward. So what do we do? Leave? That makes it worse. No, Wu Jin said. We stay, but we control the narrative. Chaewon spoke up, her voice calm but urgent. Adekunle will stage something at the block party, a panic, an incident, something that gives him a reason to say Esther's leadership is dangerous and the neighborhood needs outside intervention. Intervention, Abena repeated bitterly. You mean takeover? Exactly, Chaewon said. He'll use fear to justify removing her voice, and once she's discredited, there's no one left to organize resistance. Wu Jin stood, pacing slowly. His mind worked through angles, consequences, optics. He'd spent 15 years learning how power moved in the shadows. But shadows only worked when people didn't know what to look for. We flip it, Wu Jin said finally. Abena frowned. Flip what? The story, Wu Jin said. They want me to be the villain. We show them I'm not. Publicly, undeniably. Ayomid's eyes widened. You mean? I kneel to Esther, Wu Jin said. In front of everyone. I tell them what she did. I make it clear I'm not here to threaten anyone. I'm here because she saved my life and now someone's threatening hers. Abena stared at him. That's a risk. You're exposing yourself, your organization, everything. I know, Wu Jin said. But if we do it right, Adekunle can't twist it. How do you turn gratitude into a crime? How do you make protection look like violence? Chaewon tilted her head, considering. It could work, but only if it's genuine. If it feels staged, people will reject it. It won't be staged, Wu Jin said quietly. Everything I'm going to say is true. Abena exhaled slowly. And if Adekunle still tries something? Wu Jin's expression hardened. Then we'll be ready. But we respond. We don't initiate. We protect. We don't threaten. Ayomid nodded, already thinking through camera angles, live streams, documentation. If we do this right, the whole city will see it. The whole country, maybe. Good, Wu Jin said. Let them see. Let them see what Sunnyside really is. Not a war zone, but a community that takes care of its own. That night, Wu Jin sat with Esther on her front porch. The air was cool, the street quiet except for distant music and the occasional car passing by. Esther looked at him with tired but steady eyes. You sure about tomorrow? Wu Jin nodded. I've spent 15 years building power in the dark. It's time I used it in the light. Esther reached out and took his hand. Baby, just promise me one thing. Anything, Wu Jin said. Promise me you'll let these people decide for themselves. Don't fight their battles for them. Stand with them, not in front of them. Wu Jin swallowed hard. I promise. Esther squeezed his hand, then smiled. Small, knowing, the kind of smile that said she'd seen men try to be heroes before, and most of them got it wrong. Tomorrow, Wu Jin said quietly, they'll come looking for a villain. Esther nodded. And what you gonna give them? Wu Jin met her eyes. The truth instead. The park was alive. Music pulsed through speakers. Old-school R&B mixed with Afro beats. Kids ran between tents, faces painted, laughter loud and unfiltered. Elders sat in folding chairs, plates balanced on laps, talking slow and easy like time didn't own them. The grill smoke rose thick and sweet, carrying the smell of ribs, sausage, and something closer to home than food ever really is. Sunnyside was showing up for itself. Abena worked the food line with practiced rhythm. Iomide filmed everything, capturing joy instead of trauma for once. Adebayo stood near the stage, arms crossed, watching the crowd with protective eyes. Then Adekunle arrived. He walked in smooth, dressed sharp, buttoned down, slacks, a smile that looked rehearsed in a mirror. He greeted people by name, shook hands like a politician, acted like he'd been invited instead of tolerated. Beautiful event, Adekunle said to Adebayo, his voice warm but his eyes cold. This is what community looks like. Adebayo didn't smile back. We've been community long before you showed up. Adekunle's smile didn't falter. Of course, I'm just here to support. But his presence shifted the air, tension sliding in like smoke. Then Wu Jin arrived. No fanfare, no dramatic entrance, just 3 black SUVs pulling up quietly at the park's edge. Wu Jin stepped out, Chaewon beside him, 2 others positioned at careful distances. The music didn't stop, but the energy changed. People turned, whispers spread, parents pulled kids closer. Wu Jin walked slowly through the crowd, making eye contact, nodding respectfully. He wasn't trying to intimidate, but his presence carried weight, the kind you can't fake, can't buy, can't ignore. Adekunle watched from across the park, his smile tightening. Wu Jin reached the front, where Esther sat in her wheelchair near the stage, Abena standing beside her. The crowd went still. Wu Jin stopped in front of Esther. Then he dropped to one knee. Public, humble, undeniable. People gasped. Phones came out. Iomide's camera was already rolling. 15 years ago, Wu Jin said, his voice carrying across the park, this woman saved my life. I was 10 years old, wounded, lost, and she covered me with her body when the storm tried to take me. Esther's eyes filled, but she stayed steady. I spent years searching for her, Wu Jin continued, not because I wanted something from her, but because I needed to say thank you, because gratitude that deep doesn't fade, it waits. He took Esther's hands in his. 15 years ago, she covered me, Wu Jin said. Today, I cover her, and this neighborhood too. The crowd was silent, absorbing, processing, feeling. Then someone started clapping. Then another. Then the whole park erupted, not out of fear, but recognition, because they knew what it meant when someone knelt like that, when someone spoke truth like that. Adekunle's face went pale. That's when the disruption hit. A commotion near the east entrance, shouting, people scattering. Someone yelled, "Gun!" even though there wasn't one. Panic spread fast, instinctive, primal. Wu Jin stood immediately, scanning the crowd. Chaewon was already moving, earpiece active. Staged, she confirmed quietly. 2 men, hired, no weapons, just noise. Adekunle was moving toward the stage, microphone in hand, ready to capitalize on the chaos, ready to say this was what happened when outsiders came to Sunnyside, ready to make Esther look complicit, reckless, dangerous. But Wu Jin moved faster. He didn't shout, didn't brandish power. He raised one hand, calm, controlled, and his voice cut through the panic like a blade. Stop. The authority in that single word made people freeze. There is no threat, Wu Jin said, his voice steady and loud. Someone wants you to panic. Someone wants you to run. Don't give them that. Chaewon's team had already quietly intercepted the hired disruptors, guiding them away without spectacle. The crowd settled, confused but calming. Wu Jin turned to Adekunle, who was halfway to the stage, microphone still in hand. You were about to say something, Wu Jin said. Go ahead. Adekunle's smile faltered. I was just concerned for everyone's safety. Were you? Wu Jin said flatly. He nodded to Chaewon, who pulled up a tablet and projected it onto the stage screen behind them. Documents, financial records, permits with falsified expiration dates. Payment trails leading from a development firm to Adekunle's accounts. This is what concern looks like, Wu Jin said, his voice cold now. Manufactured violations, fake fines, businesses closed because they refuse to sell, fear disguised as compliance. The crowd murmured, anger rising, recognition dawning. Adekunle backed up a step. You can't, this is evidence, Wu Jin said. Submitted to federal authorities 3 hours ago. You weren't helping this community. You were clearing it. Adekunle's confidence shattered. His face twisted, desperation replacing charm. They hired me, he said, voice cracking. I was just doing what they... And now they'll do without you, Wu Jin said. 2 official vehicles pulled up. Not Wu Jin's, but law enforcement responding to documented fraud. Adekunle was escorted away, still protesting, still trying to explain. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Then someone started clapping again, then another, then the whole park, not celebrating violence, but justice, not chaos, but clarity. Wu Jin turned back to Esther, his posture softening. He knelt again, quieter this time. Now, he said gently, you don't have to be strong alone. Esther cupped his face, tears streaming, and whispered, Baby, I never was. The park didn't empty all at once. People stayed, sitting in folding chairs, talking in low voices, processing what they'd just witnessed. Kids played again, cautiously at first, then with full abandon. The music came back on, quieter now, like the neighborhood was catching its breath. Wu Jin stood near the edge of the tent, watching. Chaewon approached with a bottle of water and a question in her eyes. You good? She asked. Wu Jin nodded, but didn't speak, because he wasn't sure yet. Relief and exhaustion were tangled together, and something else, something he hadn't expected. Peace. Later that night, after most people had gone home, a small group gathered at Esther's house. Abena made coffee. Amina brought leftovers from the park. Adebayo sat on the porch steps, Ayomide beside him, reviewing footage. Wu Jin sat across from Esther in her living room, the bracelet plate resting on the table between them. You kept this for 15 years, Wu Jin said quietly. Esther nodded. Couldn't let it go. Couldn't let you go. Even when everybody said I was holding on to nothing. Wu Jin swallowed hard. On New Year's Eve, in Manhattan, I wasn't looking for food. Esther tilted her head, listening. I was looking for somewhere to belong, Wu Jin continued, his voice rough. Just for one night, I thought if I could sit at a table surrounded by people celebrating, maybe I'd feel normal. And they turned you away, Esther said gently. Wu Jin nodded. The rejection hurt because it wasn't about the reservation. It was about being reminded that no matter how much power I have, I'm still outside. Esther reached across and took his hand. Baby, you were never outside here. Wu Jin's eyes burned, but he didn't look away. Abena waved at me, he said, on that rooftop. She didn't know me, didn't owe me anything, but she saw a man standing alone and decided, not on my watch. Esther smiled. That's Sunnyside. That's how we're built. I know that now, Wu Jin said, and that's why I'm not leaving. Over the following weeks, things shifted, not dramatically, but steadily. The predatory fines were reversed, permits were restored. The development firm quietly withdrew their interest after federal scrutiny made the scheme too expensive to continue. Adebayo and Iomide helped coordinate a community fund, not Woojin's money alone, but contributions from people who'd been watching from the outside and wanted to invest in what Sunnyside was building. Small business grants, youth programs, a legal clinic run out of the church annex. Esther didn't become wealthy. She didn't need to. She became supported, protected, honored. And Woojin didn't buy the neighborhood. He earned a place in it, by standing beside people instead of in front of them, by protecting without claiming ownership, by showing up not once, but consistently. The next New Year's Eve, Woojin stood under simple string lights at a community gathering in Sunnyside Park. No velvet rope, no reservations, no humiliation. Just tables set up in rows, food shared family style, kids running between chairs, elders laughing at jokes they'd heard 100 times before. Abena waved him over to a table where Esther sat, flanked by Amina, Adebayo, and Iomide. "Sit down, Woojin," Abena said. "You standing there like you don't belong." Woojin smiled, small, real, and sat. Esther reached over and squeezed his hand. "See? The right table was always here." Woojin looked around, at the faces that had once been strangers, now familiar, at the neighborhood that had let him back in, not because of what he could give, but because of who he chose to be. The countdown started. 10, 9, 8. Chaewon stood nearby, off duty for once, smiling. 7, 6, 5. Iomide lifted her phone, capturing the moment, not for a story, but for memory. 4, 3, 2. Woojin closed his eyes, feeling the warmth around him, the weight of belonging he'd been searching for his whole life. 1. Fireworks exploded overhead, small, neighborhood-bought, imperfect, but loud, joyful, theirs. Esther leaned close and whispered, "Welcome home, baby." And Woojin finally understood. The right table isn't the one with the best view or the highest price. It's the one where people notice if you're missing, where someone waves you over even when you're a stranger. Where gratitude doesn't fade, it waits, then returns, then roots itself so deep it becomes family. Woojin had spent 15 years building power, but Abena's wave and Esther's arms had given him something no empire ever could, a place to belong.